You know how it is, you're trying to stay on top of your health, right? But
Yeah.
sometimes wading through all the medical information, it just feels like a lot.
It can definitely be overwhelming.
Well, today we're going to try and cut through some of that complexity. We're doing a deep dive into a really critical topic, pancreatic cancer.
Yeah, and it's critical for a tough reason. The statistics are quite stark.
They really are. Just to put it out there right away, the 5-year survival rate is only around, what, 12 to 13%?
That's about right. And that single number really tells you why understanding this disease, how it starts, why it's so challenging is just so important.
So that's our mission today. We've pulled together the key information and we're going to explore it together. How it develops, why the mortality rate is so high, and crucially, what risk factors might be actionable.
Exactly. We're aiming to take this, pretty complex subject and really illuminate what makes pancreatic cancer such a formidable opponent using the information we've got.
Not drown you in jargon, but pull out the key things to know.
That's the plan.
Okay, so where do we start? Let's maybe begin with the healthy pancreas itself, sort of the unsung hero before things go wrong.
Good idea. So picture this organ. It's nestled deep in your abdomen, kind of hiding behind your stomach.
Right, and it's closely linked to the very first part of your small intestine, the duodenum.
It is, yeah. The head of the pancreas actually wraps around it. And what's really interesting is that this one organ has two major but completely different jobs. It's quite the multitasker.
Okay, 2 jobs. What are they?
Well, first, there's its endocrine function. This is all about regulating your blood sugar. Inside the pancreas, you've got these special cells, alpha and beta cells.
Ah, insulin and glucagon producers.
Precisely. They release these hormones directly into your bloodstream to keep your glucose levels stable, like a very sophisticated internal thermostat.
Okay, that's the endocrine side. Blood sugar control. What's the other job?
The other is its exocrine function, and this is all about digestion.
So breaking down food.
Exactly. Different cells here, called acinar cells, produce really powerful digestive enzymes. But here's the key difference. These enzymes don't go into the blood.
Okay, where do they go then?
They travel through this network of tiny tubes, the pancreatic ducts, and get squirted directly into the duodenum, right where your food is starting its journey through the intestines.
To break down fats, proteins, carbs.
Yep. And it's funny, biologically speaking, even though it's deep inside you, that digestive tract is technically considered outside the body.
That's a neat point. And is one of these functions more relevant to cancer?
Unfortunately, yes. That exocrine function, specifically the ducts, the vast majority of pancreatic cancers, we're talking 85 to 90%, start in the cells lining those pancreatic ducts.
Okay, so those digestive enzyme pathways are ground zero usually.
That's right.
Which brings us to how the cancer actually develops. So it starts in those ductal cells, you said.
Most of the time, yes. Medically, you'll often hear the term ductal adenocarcinoma.
Right. Sounds complex. Can we break that down a bit?
Sure. Ductal just tells us it started in those ducts we mentioned. Adeno refers to gland tissue. The pancreas is a gland. And carcinoma is the general term for cancer that starts in skin or tissues lining into... Yeah, silent is a good word for it in the early stages. It's sneaky. You might get some very vague symptoms, maybe a bit of bellyache or some back pain.
Things you could easily brush off, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I ate something funny or I slept wrong.
Exactly. It's rarely anything specific or alarming initially, so people often don't seek medical attention right away.
And by the time more noticeable symptoms show up, like jaundice, that yellowing of the skin and eyes.
Right. By the time jaundice appears, it usually means the tumor has grown large enough to block the bile duct. And at that stage, the cancer is often already quite advanced.
Which leads directly to the second big problem, late detection.
Unlike some other common cancers, think breast cancer with mammograms or colon cancer with colonoscopies.
There isn't a standard routine screening test for pancreatic cancer for the average person?
Not for the general population, no. Screening might be considered if you're at very high risk, maybe due to a strong family history or certain genetic syndromes, but not otherwise.
And that lack of early detection, it has a huge impact on survival, doesn't it? You mentioned the overall rate, but it changes drastically based on stage.
It really does. If by chance it's caught when it's still just in the pancreas localized, the 5-year survival rate is closer to, say, 44%. Still not great, but much better.
Okay, but if it's spread regionally to nearby tissues or lymph nodes?
Then it drops significantly, down to about 16%.
And if it's metastasized, spread to distant organs like the liver or lungs?
It's
Check.
tragically low, around 3%. Those numbers just hammer home how vital finding it earlier would be.
Wow. Okay, so Silent start, late detection. And then there's a third piece, isn't there? The nature of the tumor itself.
Yes, these tumors are often inherently aggressive. They tend to grow quite
And
fast.
they're resistant to treatment.
They often are, unfortunately. They seem to have ways of fighting off chemotherapy and even immunotherapy sometimes.
Hmm.
And there's this interesting biological feature involved, too.
What's that?
It's called the stroma. Think of it as this dense, fibrous meshwork that the tumor builds around itself.
Like a protective wall.
Exactly like a protective wall. It's thick, it's dense, and it makes it physically hard for chemotherapy drugs to penetrate and reach the cancer cells. It can also shield the cancer from the body's own immune cells.
So it's like the cancer builds its own fortress?
That's a really good analogy, yeah. It's a major barrier to effective treatment.
Okay. That paints a pretty challenging picture.
Okay.
But it's crucial information. Now, let's shift gears a bit. Let's focus on what you, the listener, can actually take away from this in terms of risk.
Right, because while some factors are out of our control, others are potentially modifiable. It's important to separate those out.
Good point. Let's start with the controllable ones. What can people potentially influence?
Well, top of the list, and this comes up for so many health issues, is smoking.
Still a major player.
A huge player. Smoking basically doubles your risk of developing pancreatic cancer. Quitting is probably the single most effective thing someone can do to lower their risk.
Okay, smoking number one. What else?
Obesity and related conditions like metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. Having a higher body mass index, or BMI, is consistently linked to increased risk.
So managing weight and diabetes is important here too.
Absolutely. And tied into that is physical inactivity. Living a sedentary lifestyle seems to increase susceptibility as well. Regular exercise offers protection.
Makes sense. Diet, exercise.
Yeah.
What about alcohol?
Alcohol abuse is another one, particularly heavy, long-term drinking that leads to chronic pancreatitis.
Chronic pancreatitis being long-term inflammation of the pancreas.
Exactly. That chronic inflammation seems to create an environment where cancer is more likely to develop. So moderating alcohol intake or avoiding excessive use is key.
So these controllable factors, smoking, weight, activity, alcohol, they really point towards general healthy lifestyle choices, don't they?
They really do. And the great thing is addressing these factors doesn't just lower potential pancreatic cancer risk. It benefits your overall health in so many other ways. Heart health, diabetes prevention, you name it.
Okay, so those are things people can potentially act on. Now, what about the risk factors that are, well, less controllable?
Right. These often relate to your family background and genetics. A big one is simply having a close family member, a parent, sibling, or child who's had pancreatic cancer. That does increase your risk.
It doesn't guarantee you'll get it, of course.
Oh, absolutely not. But the risk is elevated compared to someone with no family history.
And then there are specific genetic factors.
Yes. Researchers have identified certain inherited gene mutations that significantly increase susceptibility. Probably the best-known example is the BRCA2 gene mutation.
Which is also linked to breast and ovarian cancer risk, right?
Exactly. Mutations in BRCA2 and some other genes like PALB2 or those linked to Lynch syndrome carry a higher risk for pancreatic cancer too.
So if you know you have a strong family history, or perhaps you've even had genetic testing showing one of these mutations, what then?
That's definitely something to discuss very openly with your doctor or a genetic counselor. Depending on the level of risk, they might discuss options for surveillance or earlier screening, although, as we said, standard screening isn't routine yet. But it's a conversation worth having.
Definitely. Okay, so looking ahead, is there hope on the horizon? What's happening in research?
There's a huge amount of research ongoing, thankfully. Scientists are working really hard on several fronts.
Like better screening tests.
It's a major goal, yes. Finding ways to detect it earlier, perhaps through blood tests looking for specific markers or improved imaging techniques, that would be a game changer.
And identifying more genetic markers.
Yes, to better pinpoint who is at highest risk and might benefit most from close monitoring. And of course, developing better treatments.
Treatments that can maybe get past that stroma barrier or overcome the resistance.
Exactly. Things like targeted therapies aimed at specific mutations within the cancer cells, new immunotherapy approaches, strategies to break down that protective stroma. Lots of different angles are being explored.
But for right now, the key message still seems to be
Early detection is paramount. It remains the single biggest factor influencing survival odds currently.
So while we wait for those breakthroughs, understanding the basics, how the pancreas works, how this cancer develops, and especially those modifiable risk factors, it really is valuable knowledge.
It absolutely is. It empowers you to make proactive health decisions. Understanding the challenge also helps appreciate the research efforts.
Okay, so let's just quickly summarize those core challenges again. Why is pancreatic cancer so deadly?
It really boils down to that tough combination. One, it often starts silently. No obvious early warnings.
Leading to point two, late detection partly because we don't have those widespread screening tools yet.
Right. And three, the tumors themselves are often aggressive growers and have that built-in resistance, that stroma, making treatment difficult.
A formidable trio of challenges. But let's end by reinforcing the actionable stuff.
Please, remember those controllable risk factors. Don't smoke, maintain a healthy weight, stay physically active, manage diabetes, and avoid excessive alcohol. Your choices there really can make a difference.
Not just for pancreatic cancer, but for your overall health.
For everything, really.
Which kind of leads us to a final thought. There was that line in our source material. Your body usually gets it right, but when it doesn't, a little knowledge can go a long way.
Hmm.
Maybe think about it this way. When you dig into the complexities and the challenges of something like pancreatic cancer, doesn't it just throw into sharp relief how incredibly amazing and resilient your body is most of the time?
That's a great point. The fact that it functions so well day in, day out, against all odds sometimes.
Yeah. Understanding when it goes wrong, like in this devastating disease, maybe helps us appreciate the sheer marvel of our own health when things are going right. Something to ponder.